Hello and welcome to another analysis behind the news, where we provide the perspective that you can use to help save American liberty and independence. Last week, the freshman representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and fellow Democratic supporters rolled out their Green New Deal plan that supposedly battles climate change, but is also an agenda for economic, social, and racial justice, according to her. Now, if you haven't watched last week's outdoor press conference that discusses this, it's highly recommended. The plan, which is rather short on details, pushes forth these points. It commits to a 10-year plan to mobilize every aspect of American society at a scale not seen since World War II, to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions and create economic prosperity for all. Okay? Now, let me get into the finer points here. It seeks to, as they have written in here in their FAQs, it will move America to 100% clean and renewable energy, create millions of family-supporting wage union jobs, ensure a just transition for all communities and workers to ensure economic security for people and communities that have historically relied on fossil fuel industries. Ensure justice and equity for frontline communities by prioritizing investment, training, climate and community resiliency, economic and environmental benefits in these communities. Build on FDR's second Bill of Rights by guaranteeing a job with a family-sustaining wage, family and medical leave, vacations, and retirement security. High-quality education, including higher education and trade schools. Clean air and water and access to nature. Healthy food, high-quality health care, safe, affordable, adequate housing, economic environment free of monopolies, and economic security for all who are unable or unwilling to work. And, according to this list of FAQs, the plan will also dismantle the fossil fuel industry as well as no longer having a need for nuclear energy. And as many commentators last week pointed out, this would certainly wipe out aviation as we know it. The plan calls for public transit to take over and for electric vehicles to replace every combustion energy vehicle. Though only electric tractor prototypes currently exist, it's unsure how farmers and ranchers would be able to provide what the plan calls for as a greenhouse gas-free food system that ensures universal access to healthy food and expanding family farming. Well, folks, it's unlikely that any of these planners talked to a farmer, a rancher, a business owner, or anyone involved in the supply chain industry. The plan also calls for every building to be upgraded or replaced in order to meet higher energy efficiency standards. The cost of this has been conservatively estimated at $25 trillion, which is about $5 trillion more than 1 year of GDP in the US. And their plan to pay for it? Have the Federal Reserve loan money and set up additional banks to dole out the credit. Now, if you know anything at all about the Federal Reserve, there's nothing federal about it, nor are there reserves. But you should know that it creates money out of thin air, which inflates the money supply, devaluing the dollar. Now, what you are witnessing is not unexpected, and it's not as crazy as some have been saying that it is, because it's actually a perfect opportunity to demonstrate three things. The first is that this is a strategy of getting their opposition to compromise. Number two, their plan for enslavement is now a congressional resolution. And number three, this is how the New World Order is built. Now let's take these one at a time. The first one, a compromise strategy. The socialists in Congress have taken a page from the playbook of Democrats regarding the art of compromise. They have placed a very ambitious plan on the table that has very little chance to succeed. However, by engaging public opinion and getting voters to see the need to just do something on climate change, they will make inroads with many weak-kneed Republicans and moderate Democrats. They will capitalize on a national discussion that the media will only be too willing to help with, to the tune of getting government action in the name of climate change. While in the end it will look like they did not get the Green Deal that they wanted, they will still have made progress moving the issue forward. It's like they take 2 steps forward, but are driven back only 1 step. Progress is still being made. Now, Democrats are notorious for this technique, and Republicans as a whole have still not caught on. Now, moving on to the second point. This Green New Deal is basically a plan for enslavement. When you look at each of the points they hope to achieve, how do you think they'll get it done? The plan mentions mobilizing every aspect of American society at a scale not seen since World War II. Well, let's recall what happened to American industry in World War II. American industry folded to the pressures of the demand from the federal government that it supply its needs for war materiel. That meant pouring large amounts of money into private industry, like building additional factories, retooling existing factories, and expanding the workforce to keep production running when supplies were available. With this investment came controls. The federal government quickly took advantage of this opportunity to suck up power, and in its mobilization efforts, industry was confiscated. Many agencies were created, including the War Production Board, that grew to about 20,000 bureaucrats. It was tasked with converting America's civilian-based industry into one producing that material. The first industry targeted was the automobile industry. Now, I was online and I came across this very interesting little booklet. It's called Mobilizing U.S. Industry in World War II by Alan Grotman. It was published in 1996. Now, the industry was ordered to cease civilian automotive production and to produce aircraft engines, machine guns, tanks, tank parts, diesel engines, army trucks, and thousands of airplanes. That's where I got the stats from. As one author, Mr. Grotman, put it in here, the War Production Board had the power to compel acceptance of war orders by any producer in the country, and it could requisition any property needed for the war effort. And down below it here, it even says, and the board also controlled the supply of raw materials. Now think about that for a minute. Here we have precedents that has already been set since World War II. Industries being confiscated, and those that are ignorant of history are doomed to repeat it. Do you not think that the Green New Deal supporters are not thinking of this level of government action and coercement? Now, during the press conference, U.S. Senator Ed Markey exclaimed, "From the air we breathe, to the jobs that employ us, to the neighborhoods we live in, to the economy we operate within, climate change defines our existence." Folks, that's the level in which they are thinking, that everything will need to be controlled in the name of climate change. But hey, let's not be too surprised by this. After all, the John Birch Society exposed this plan back in 1992 when it was announced at a United Nations summit. This ended up being Agenda 21, which has now morphed into Agenda 2030. In fact, the Green New Deal supporters put 2030 as their target date. Thanks to Agenda 21/2030, there is much support for all levels of government to battle climate change and to create sustainable development. And this leads us to point number 3, the building of the New World Order. Let me read something to you that JBS founder Robert Welch wrote in August 1969 issue of the JBS Bulletin. Now, I've pulled some passages from it, so I'm not going to read directly from the actual copy, but here are some of the excerpts that I pulled. He wrote, "For seldom in history has there been so worthy a cause at that which now activates the members of the John Birch Society. At stake in this fight are not only the freedom and the lives of yourself, your family, and your friends, but a whole civilization." Again, this is in 1969. "And it is or was a reasonably humane and tremendously hopeful civilization, which had been created for us by the labor, the longing, the courage, and the sacrifices of our ancestors. For our legacy now included a solidly established belief in the worth, the dignity, and the responsibility of each individual man. We, the early children of the 20th century, were truly the heirs of all the ages. But evil never dies. It only seems to fade away because it goes in hiding. The employers and predecessors of Karl Marx have been hard at work for a long time in a conspiratorial undertaking to undermine and sweep away our whole inheritance. Their incredibly ambitious intention, clearly stated by themselves and laid down as unchanging policy for each successive generation of the growing conspiracy to follow, was satanic in its stark simplicity. It was their plan to destroy all religion, all existing governments, and all basic human institutions. Out of the ruins, chaos, confusion, and despair, thus to be created there, was to arise their own new order of civilization. This new order was hinted at with clever audacity during more recent times by such names as the New Deal and the New Frontier. The new order in its ultimate form, after all of the old order had been insidiously destroyed, was to consist of an absolute tyranny over all mankind. It was to be ruled through brutal force and terror by the conspirators themselves and their successors at the top, with the rest of the human race as their helpless slaves at the bottom. By today, 1969, they have already succeeded in imposing this cruel regime in something approaching its final shape over the inhabitants of Russia, of China, and a total altogether of approximately 1,160,000,000 of our fellow human beings, and we ourselves are directly in the path of this advance. One thing that we can add to this is that those advancing globalism have created the crises that we now see as global warming or climate change. They are using that as a reason to enact Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, sustainable development, radical environmental regulations, and now the Green New Deal. Since it has very little chance of passing, Democratic sponsors are popping up to take advantage of the media wave that they can use to help funnel 2020 presidential votes and dollars. Watch to see how many Republicans fall for this garbage and allow this resolution to move forward a slice at a time in various forms of legislation, and how many of them get sucked into parroting the globalist talking points. After all, the Communist Manifesto, which was released in 1948, and its 10 planks haven't been accomplished yet, but we know that definite progress has certainly been made. And if you refute that, go back in and take a look at the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto and find out where we're at with those. If President Trump was sincere in his State of the Union speech saying that America will never be a socialist country, then he should use his position to educate Americans, especially Congress, on just where those constitutional limitations are located. Because that is the true difference between enslavement and freedom. A limited government chained down by the shackles of the Constitution and enforced by checks and balances will protect American liberty and independence. And folks, it's that simple. All Americans are locked into a battle with their liberty and independence at stake. It's just a matter of them recognizing it. And this is where the John Birch Society has played a part for more than 60 years. Can you imagine where American liberty and independence would be without the John Birch Society, having fought for it for these last 60 years? So let's go on the offense by reining in big government. The way to do that is to use Thomas Jefferson's advice of educating the electorate. Next, we must enforce the Constitution and not revise it. No amendments will force Congress or any other part of the federal government to obey the Constitution. They ignore the current one now. Why wouldn't they ignore an amended one? So by using the tools in Article 6 of the Constitution, we can force the federal government back into its constitutional limitations. If you're interested in learning more, watch our video called Rein in Big Government with Article 6. We've included a link in the description. Then, apply for membership with the John Birch Society to be part of a winning national strategy that amplifies your local efforts. Find out from staff and volunteer leaders what opportunities are available in your area. And of course, as always, please like and share this video with others. And until next time, we'll see you then.